Today we are going to do another oil pastel, so let's get started. The first thing that you'll want to do is to take your mixed media pad, remove a piece of paper, put the pad aside. Then you'll take the paper, and because the image that we're working from is horizontal, we're going to turn the paper to match that so that it is horizontal. You can take pieces of tape and tape down your paper. If you can manage to tape it along the edge with about half of the tape over the paper and half of the tape on the workspace, then that is going to be best. It will help to secure your paper while you work. And this is artist tape, so you can carefully remove it after we finish our project, and you'll have a nice white border, which is very satisfying. There we go. This is the image that we're working from. Bring out our oil pastels and our large circle template. We'll also need our 6B pencil. So I want you to see what the image is that I'm working from, and I'm going to talk you through some decisions as I go along so that you are able to use an image like this from the internet and then try to use it as inspiration for your own artwork. So I can see in here that it's made up of a few elements. The background is relatively dark with shades of blue. The moon itself is clearly a dominant feature, and it is perfectly circular, which is fortunate for us because we have something else that is perfectly circular. And it is in the midground, and in the foreground we have these trees that are largely in silhouette. And so all of those things are things that we are going to keep in mind and try to translate from this photo into our oil pastel. At the same time, we can have a little bit of artist interpretation, and we can decide if we want to simplify certain elements, if we want to delete certain elements, if we want to embellish certain elements. So all of those things are what we call interpretation. One of the things that I love about this is that the moon is off center. It becomes a more dynamic composition. If it were right in the center, it would be a very different feel. I like the off-center look, so I'm going to mimic that in my painting. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take that circle template and trace it. I'm going to place it off-center, so just to the left of center in my painting. Maybe pushed up toward the top just a little bit. It's going to be different from the source picture. I'm going to take my pencil and lightly trace that. Now I can move the circle template away, and I'm just going to go ahead and get out all of my blues and give myself a little bit of a plan. Let's see, is this blue or is that black? Nope, that's black. Blue, blue, blue. One more blue, okay. So I have 4 blues, and if I put them in order of light to dark, I think it's something like this with my sky blue, my cobalt blue, and then these 2 blues that I'm never quite sure which one is darker than the other. One's a little bit redder than the other, and one has a little bit more green in it. So I can kind of see how that's going to work best. I'm going to go ahead and start with the lightest blue, and very carefully, because I want to preserve the brightness and the lightness that is this moon. So very carefully, I'm going to trace around the outside of my moon, going nice and slow. I want to keep the integrity of the circle as much as I can. And I'm laying down quite a bit of oil pastel. So my pressure is relatively hard. If you're like me, it's always hardest to get the opposite side of a shape. So I might even turn my body and turn my oil pastel. However it works for you, the secret to really drawing right on a line, whether it's oil pastel or any other material, is speed and going really slow. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue that out away from my moon. I'm exaggerating this brightness of the moon in my painting. And I'm going to continue to make my blue, my light blue, bigger. Now I'm barely touching. I know I'm going to start integrating some darker blue pastel, but I'm just gonna put down a very light aura of this light blue all the way around. That's going to help me blend my darker colors without it looking like a rainbow. I want to have a super soft ombre effect and not a stripy rainbow effect. That's what I'm trying to do here. Okay. Awesome. So now put that aside. We're going to our next darkest in value blue, which is our cobalt blue. And we're going to go very lightly, almost up to the edge of the moon. I'm layering pastels. Layering pastels is a really great way of utilizing the medium. Once we blend it, it'll be a nice ombre effect. So I'm layering, and I'm barely touching. There's not a lot of pressure in this one. And you notice the direction of my oil pastel strokes are circular. So it's like making a big circle around the moon. And that's really intentional. The more that you can play off of the shape of that you're creating in the direction of your strokes, the more that shape is going to be emphasized. So if any of these strokes do show up, having them be radial, circular around the moon is going to make it show up even better. Okay, so now I'm going away from the moon, and I'm going to add a little bit more pressure. Because this is the area that's going to be dominantly the oil pastel. You can see that you can still see some of the paper through my oil pastel, so I want to maybe put on a little bit more oil pastel so that there's a lot of the medium, quite a bit of it, so that blending is easy to do. And now very light strokes. As I move further away from the moon, I'm going to start layering even darker blue on top of it. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to switch to a darker blue, and I'm not sure which is going to work better between these two. So I'm just going to get a piece of paper out of my sketchbook and see which of these blues I like next to the cobalt and the sky blue. So to me, if I'm trying to create a nighttime sky, oops, which one did I do? That one? Yeah. This looks a little bit lighter and purplier. This looks a little bit darker and nighttimey. So I'm going to go with the oil pastel blue that is the darker one. Oh yeah, that's nice. Again, I'm layering. So I'm putting a layer of the dark. I'm not coloring over all of the cobalt and all of the sky blue. I'm just layering part way into the cobalt with some light pressure and then more pressure as I move away. And I want to bring this around, so I have some of that ombre effect all the way around the moon. And again, you get to decide like how close to the moon does this get. It'll be a little bit different if you bring it in way close to the moon or keep it far away. It's up to you. All right. I'm going to let these continue to stick out. And then I'm going to introduce some black. And just remember that black is super strong, so it can easily overpower. I'm just going to introduce a little bit of black because my image, my original image, is so dark. I'm going to introduce a little bit of black and really accentuate that nighttime sky. But I'm going to try to keep in mind that it can get a little bit overwhelming pretty quickly. And just bringing some streaks in a bit. Trying not to do too much black. Okay, now I'm going to put this down and let's start blending. Now you have some choices. You can use your finger. You can use tissue paper. This area is probably too big to do with Q-tips. Okay, I'm gonna start with the tissue paper and then see how I feel about it. You're just going to fold the tissue paper so that you make this little like nub. And you always start in the lightest area first, which is what makes it a little bit tricky because we're going to try to preserve the white of the moon. So I'm just going to come up against the moon, and you see how I'm turning the tissue paper and turning my hand so that it doesn't just start to blend everything into my moon. So this is going to be the tough part, guys. Carefully and slowly going around the outside of that moon. You might find that it's easier for you to move your body, shift your position so that you can see around. You want to try to blend that so it's nice and soft. Now we're gonna go into just a little further away from the moon. We're working directly off of the moon, trying to keep it nicely blended as we move away from the moon. You do little circular motions, sometimes works nicely. Experiment with the amount of pressure and the effect that you get with the pressure. Do all of the blending directly. I'm gonna switch. I'm gonna switch to my finger and see if that makes any difference. Just keep going around that moon, picking up more of that oil pastel, blending it from light to dark. I don't even mind that there's a little bit of texture, interesting texture that's being revealed. I don't mind that at all. I find that that's kind of interesting. It kind of gives, you know, when you look into the moon and you blink your eyes and you have just kind of this aura. It's a little bit of that effect. It's so interesting. I really like that. That is very, very interesting. Something that I didn't really plan for, but I kind of really like. I'm going to take it all the way to the outside. That's what's going to give me a nice amount of color all the way around. So interesting. Now my finger is a mess. So if you want to take a minute and wash your fingers, then you certainly can do that. A little bit. Or you can wipe it down so that it doesn't become a problem. Okay, step number 1, that was our background. Now we're looking at the moon, which is in the midground, and we're looking at the shapes. I'm actually going to go ahead and zoom in. I'm folding this just so that you can see the moon. So the moon has these shapes made from craters and shadows, darker areas on the moon. And even though they show up really gray here, and I do have a gray, so if I was going with realism, I definitely could use that. But I really like this light blue, and so I think most of my, craters are going to be, this light blue. The first thing that I want to do is try to create a sense of the moon being round, and you can see how on the outside of the moon, it's just a little bit darker than on the in the very center. So the brightest spot is going to be in the center, and then slightly less bright around the outside. Now I don't want to go overboard with this, right? Because I still want this to read as a moon. In fact, anyway, so I'm just putting down the littlest. I'm not even barely touching. I'm just barely introducing a little bit of this light blue, and then I'm going to blend it with even just a little bit more. I don't want to get carried away, but so I'm just putting a little bit of oil pastel on my finger, and then letting my finger kind of smooth it into the outside. Again, really nice ombre, so it's just rounding the moon, just softening it. And then we're going to get some of our craters in there, so you can it doesn't have to be perfect. You can just very lightly, this is just part of the story. And it's okay if your craters aren't exactly realistic. You get to decide how realistic you want to be. I'm making some kind of shapes. I'm just looking over here, and if I see a shape that's kind of like that, I don't want to turn it into a globe, right? I don't want to turn it in. It's still the moon. And I'm not sure how much I love those craters. I don't know. I could kind of live with it for a while and then maybe come back and decide. Maybe it's okay. I don't know. Okay. Another way that you can do some more controlled shapes is with the Q-tip. So if you put some oil pastel onto the Q-tip, then you can make those shapes, and they're still going to be relatively soft. Actually, you guys, this is definitely the way to go. Oh yeah, oh yeah, that's working, that's working. And I keep looking back. I keep referring back to this moon. There's this like floating spot out here. Oh, that was a good idea. Okay. Do you see how you can kind of like take your Q-tip and smush it into the end of either the gray or the blue? Okay. So that's looking moonish. It's not looking like the earth, you know. And I'm liking it. I'm liking it. It's good. Okay. That's good. That's good. Now I'm going to introduce some of these trees, and you can see I have 1, 2, 3, 4 trees that are in front of my moon, and they're various heights. And I'm going to start by just giving myself an idea of where those are going to be. So the tallest one is not quite in the center, just off to the center and about halfway up my moon. So I'm going to give myself a little dot where that's going to be, and then a line coming straight down. I'm using my 6B pencil. And then the smaller one is over to the side. Give myself a little dot and a line straight down. This one next to the tallest one, and its little sister plant over here. Give myself a starting place and a dot straight down. One of the things that I really like about this, I can see that this tree that's on the furthest outside left side is taller than the one that's just to its right, but shorter than my tallest one. So I really like the way that the trees naturally are different heights and kind of accentuate the shape of the moon. I might even exaggerate the one that's in the tallest one and make it come up even further. So I can do that as an artist. I can decide if I want it to be up a little higher, a little lower, whatever it is. So now, like I said, these are, did I say deciduous? Coniferous. Anyway, coniferous trees, and they do have this very tall triangular shape, but it's also important to keep in mind the profile of the branches. So I'm going to start at the top, and I'm just kind of coming out, starting at my what would be the center of my tree, and then just bringing these lines out. And these are really close to the tree trunk right now because it's very, very narrow at the top. And bringing these lines out, and as I come away from the trunk, I'm lifting my pencil It's again very, very narrow, so don't get too wide. You want it to be very narrow. You can see it's not even the width of my finger at this point. Very, very narrow. Again, I'm using my 6B. And some of those branches are closer to the tree, to the center of the tree. And then some of them extend just a little further out. So short little strokes, starting at the tree trunk, moving away from the tree trunk, and doing slightly different, some slightly longer, some slightly shorter. And the nice thing about doing landscapes is that they're very forgiving. Trees look different from each other. And so your trees don't have to look exactly like mine. They can just look very personal, very much like you. And we're going to take this all the way down below our moon into the blue area from around the moon. And we're going to do this several more times. Follow the shape of your reference image. Like use those as a guide. And these trees are going to kind of start to blend into one another. The base, wipe off my colored pastel, oil pastels. So go slow and really think about what you're doing and how, the tree is shaping up. They tend to not be perfectly symmetrical, so sometimes I'll go back in and make the right and left side balanced. They will definitely want to be balanced, but they don't necessarily have to be perfectly symmetrical. The nice thing about trees is that you can really shape and reshape them until you're happy with them. So if things seem to be going awry, that's okay. You have time and materials, and that's all it takes. Just to keep at it until you're happy with it. Okay, we're going to extend these down, and they're going to kind of like start to mold into each other. And then this last one, kind of really pointed at the top. I think that's one of the things that you want to keep in mind is that they get very, very narrow at the top, and then they start to branch out. Get it? Branch out. It's okay. I laugh at my own jokes if nobody laughs with me. Okay. I feel like we're making a Christmas card. All right. Okay, now let's open this back up and see. You can see that there are more trees along here and that the base is very heavily wooded. So the trees kind of start to commingle with whatever vegetation is on the ground around here. So we're going to kind of keep that in mind. And we might put another one of our trees over here. And patience. Patience is really the secret here. And our ground plane, you can see from here, our ground plane is just below where the moon is. And I can see one of the things that's happening here that I really like is that the moon is getting partly covered by some of this. So I might come back in here, and it's easy to make my trees wider, bigger, stronger, take up more space. That's easier than trying to trim them after you've already drawn them. So I'm going to go ahead and make them a little bit stronger. I maybe made them too narrow to begin with. So going up to the top, they're going to remain narrow, but down here, they're going to get stronger, darker. And I'm gonna see if I like the blue on top or if I like the black on top, and if that makes any difference or not. Not really. I kind of just like the pencil. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create another one. Maybe this one is another tall one. Maybe it's a little bit fatter. So don't rush it. You've spent so much time on these beautiful trees in front of your moon. So take your time. This is one of those paintings or pieces of artwork that there's a lot of work that goes into the foreground. Okay, and we are going to visually connect these trees in the front. And it's the ground is going to go all the way down to the very bottom. It's okay if you use up a little bit of pencil, right? That's what it's there for. So visually connecting these. By making the ground go all the way and connect to the trees. The trees start to get really wide at the bottom, and then the ground kind of fits in there as well. And maybe there's another tree over here. Take your time. Make that tree really have his own kind of personality. No need to rush. I'm going to experiment just a little bit to see what happens when I add just a little bit of white. Ooh. Do we like that? A little bit of white on the tree that is maybe catching some moonlight. This is kind of interesting. You can watch and just see how this turns out. So I'm just this side of the trees bringing in some white so that it is clear that this is still tree over here. I don't know. Part of art is not quite knowing where you're going and feeling your way for how to get there. If you like that, feel free to do that on yours and see if how it turns out. Just doing another little bit of white on the tree that's outside, that's not silhouetted. And maybe there's like some little areas that catch a little bit of the moonlight. So this is kind of interesting. I don't mind this at all. That start to kind of glow a little bit in the moonlight. Maybe there's some bushes, or I think I do want to go back and this nice and dark in here. So I'm using my black pencil and just darkening these trees up a little bit more. So, like I said, this is your artwork and you get to make some of these decisions and see, kind of just balance out what you think is going to look good with what your eye tells you. And keep working at it. I'm filling in using my black colored pencil, the ground, so that it's nice and dark, and still allowing the little like white areas. I think that kind of turned out neat. I like that, to be like little highlights where the moon glow kind of catches on bushes or something like that. So there you go. Carefully take off your tape. And my secret to removing tape so that it doesn't tear the paper is to pull it back on itself, going really super slow, pulling back on itself. And part of the reason you want to go slow is so that if it does start to tear, then you can stop and start pulling from the other direction. Artist, I'm going to pull out one of my pens, sign in my white border. And I always like to put the year. That helps me remember when I did it. Okay, great job, guys. Awesome.